All right, guys, we're starting. Okay. All righty. So we've been talking about the the positive side of Kibud Avim, of honoring parents. And as we mentioned, Serene brought some beautiful hidushim, some beautiful new insights last week in terms of Esav and what he taught us through his behavior, through his struggles, and it was absolutely fascinating. So again, the recording will go out. I strongly recommend everybody listen to it. Tonight, I wanted to do something a little bit more challenging. Hey, Zeke, a little more challenging. Great to have you. And I want to go at it from the more detailed side of things, and then blow it up to the general side of things. And we're going to go at the following. What if mom and dad's values, or mom or dad's values, are very different? What if their values are conflicting? What if their values are anti-Torah? Then what? So it's a little bit, we're going to touch on a few of the not overly complicated, but a little nuanced halachot in the beginning. And then we're going to blow it up to the broad ideas. Okay? So let's start. There is we have a concept, a biblical commandment of lifnei iver lo titen mikshol, right? Anybody know what that means? Anybody remember?
Don't put an obstacle in front of a blind person.
Excellent. So we can't cause a person to stumble. We can't cause a person to fail. And the classic cases that are brought in reference to that halacha, that commandment is biblical, by the way. It's not rabbinic. So it's on the highest level, that you can't cause another person to fail or to stumble in terms of halacha, in terms of a mitzvah, in terms of stuff like that. Good. And what is it brought? In what context? It's brought with two core examples in the tractate of Avodah Zarah. One example is if a Nazir, a Jewish person who's sworn off drinking wine for a period of time, a Nazirite, a person who wants to seclude himself somewhat from society and attempt to reach a different level for his own personal growth. And the Torah is conflicted on whether that's a good thing or otherwise. But if a person has sworn off the use of wine, the drinking of wine, then we can't go and hand him a bottle of wine, right? Because lifnei iver, don't put something in front of somebody that may cause him to stumble. Okay? So headline is, be thoughtful enough about another person's needs and values that we don't attempt to, or we don't, in a lax type of way, cause them to fail in something they're committed to. Good. This concept of not causing someone to stumble or to fail is extended to beyond the Jewish community with the halacha that don't give an ever min hachai, don't give a limb from a live animal to a non-Jew. We can't eat limbs from a live animal, right? You can't yank the leg out of a cow or out of a sheep and eat it, right? You can't do it because it's called ever min hachai. It's the limb of something living. So, and the Goyim, non-Jews, also have the same commandment. It's from the original 7 Noachite laws. So we also have the commandment that you can't take a juicy leg of a living sheep and put it in front of a non-Jewish person, and it might tempt him to want to eat it, right? So we have to be careful not to cause another person to stumble. Okay, so far? Okay, so now, question is this. Let's say dad asks for his son to give him something to eat. And the son knows that the father will not make a beracha before he eats it. And he will not make the beracha, the blessing, after he's finished eating. He won't make either blessing. So now, on the one hand, you have the mitzvah, the biblical mitzvah, that someone has to obey and respect his father or mother. On the other hand, you're putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man, so to speak, because we know that the father or the mother is not going to say the blessing before the item and is therefore going to sin. So by giving them the item, we're causing them to sin. So what would you do? What do you think the halakha is? Question clear?
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it seems like the blind man is incapable of seeing the thing that you put in front of him. Whereas I'm having a hard time with you comparing that to an able, bodied or seeing vision person. And the Torah goes out of its way to say, don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind man, not in front of anybody, right? Not in front of you or me or a blind person specifically. If they are not capable of seeing a stumbling block, don't put it in front of them. But,
okay, but let's be clear. One second. I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's be clear. I gave you those two examples for a reason. The person is not literally blind. The person is at a point where he might be tripped up by your actions.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha. But
that's what we're doing. So,
they should be responsible enough to know that they shouldn't be making berachot. So
okay, but they're not going to make the berachah. So now the onus is on you. They're not going to say the blessing. So now, can you give him that food to eat because you're obligated to as a son?
Yes.
Or because you don't want him to stumble, you have two competing biblical commandments. One is I can't cause him to stumble, and the other is I have to respect him. So which trumps which here? Sarah?
So maybe one of them is like Adam to Adam, and the other one is Adam to Hashem.
And therefore what?
And therefore, you as a person has to be obligated to your parents, but the parents to God are a whole different issue that has nothing to do with you.
Okay, and therefore, what would you say? Can I give it to him or not?
You have to give your parent the food to eat.
You have to give it to them. Even though they're for sure going to fail.
Yeah.
The guy, the Nazarite with the wine may or may not drink it. Over here, your father said, get me that pastry. You know he's going to eat it. You know he's not going to make the beracha. He's 100% going to fail.
But
You're 100% enabling that.
But in the two examples that you gave us, you said that you didn't say that the Nazir or the non-Jewish person asked for it. In this situation, the father is actually asking for it. So you're not putting the stumbling block, he's asking for it. So does that make a difference?
Okay, so what do you say? He's asking for it in this case. Yeah? So
so I'm saying you're not actually putting the stumbling block, someone's asking for food and leave it at that. What they want to do with it is up to them.
Now you won't
What
be
if he asked for a ham sandwich?
Yep.
What if he wanted a ham sandwich? What are you going to give it that then also?
What if he's a diabetic and he can't have that pastry? That also happens very often. They ask you for the thing that's allowed.
Excellent. What if he's a diabetic? Excellent.
Then you don't give it to him, but that's a different reason, not because he's not going to make a beracha, but because
now he's getting angry at you. But I asked you for it. How can you not give it to me?
That has to do with his health. That's a whole different issue.
But this has to do with his destiny, with his eternity.
He's still asking you something, and if he's asking you and you're saying no, I think that's a problem. If you're offering it, I don't know, maybe that's something else. But if he's asking
you and Joy, to your point, beautiful, Joy. To your point, it's not exactly like the first case. It's not exactly like the case with the Nazarite or with the limb from a live animal, because in this case he's asking you to do it. In that case, you offered it. Serena, it speaks a little bit to where you were going with this also. So in this case, he's asking you to do it. In the other case, you were offering it. So in the other case, you went out of your way to do the wrong thing. Now you're just trapped. You're just trapped in a box, right? So our rabbis come down in an interesting way. They say that in this case, and it's not going to be true in every case, We're going to talk about three core cases that I think are representative of general cases. They say in this case, you're better off giving it to your father, knowing he's not going to make the beracha, with the idea that because he knows you make berachot, you make blessings before you eat and after you eat, because he knows you do that, and you were kind enough to respond to his thing, knowing he's not. So he's gonna see that as positive behavior on your part, and maybe someday, because of that positive behavior on your part, even though in this case you enabled him to stumble, but because of that positive behavior on your part, someday he's going to start saying blessings himself. That's where Chavara Yosef comes down on it. Now, he says, on the other hand, be clever. How would you be clever? Take a pastry for yourself, say a beracha, and tell him, Dad, I'll have you in mind when I say the beracha. Have in mind to be fulfilling. Hey, Jeff, have in mind to have me fulfill the beracha for you. Okay? So that's sort of an end around. But the headline here is, if Dad tells me, hand me this thing, I'm not going to say it, knowing he's not going to say a beracha on it. In this case, Kibud Abayim trumps the obligation to say a beracha. Okay? Why? What's the overarching assumption here? The assumption is, by your good behavior, you may enable a change in his behavior over time. So that's the shikul da'at here. That's the weighing of the scales. That's the different considerations. Good? So the takeaway from this first case is, if my behavior, my kindness, can ultimately help him get to a better place where his behavior will be modified, I can even aid and assist him to do something against halakha, against Jewish law now, with the idea that I'm helping him potentially be better over time. Okay? Thoughts, questions?
Well, you're using that with just something, asking something for a beracha, but what about more important things? Like he wants to go into a car on Shabbat.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's talk about some of those. Great, Sarah. Great. Let's get to some other stuff more along those lines. Good. And again, I'm bringing these cases. I chose these cases because I want you to learn both sides. I want you to learn, for example, the case of putting a stumbling block in front of a person in general, and what the classic examples of those are: the Nazarite and the Goy, the non-Jew with a limb from a live animal. And we're going to bring a few other cases where the point is that we understand the reference in terms of honoring a parent, and we also understand the case itself. Okay, we have another case where you're not allowed to include someone in a zimun, right? We say a zimun. We gather three men together to introduce the Birkat Hamazon before we say it. So if there are three men in the room who ate together, or 10 men who ate together, as we know, we invite them to pray together, to say the Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after meals together. But what if one of those people is Mechalel Shabbat b'Farhesia, publicly violates Shabbat? The halacha is he can't be invited to the zimun. He can't be invited to be one of the three people who does this introduction to the Birkat Hamazon, right? Okay, so that's the halacha. I have a zimun. I have this introduction that we do before Birkat Hamazon with 3 people or 10 people. Someone, hey Jeff, hey Erwin, someone who's mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia, who publicly desecrates Shabbat, can't be invited to be part of the zimun. What if that person who publicly violates Shabbat is daddy? And I'm sitting at his table. Now what? What do you say? Huh? What do you say?
I
Again,
say
maybe you,
Same rule, that if eventually he might come to it on his own.
agreed.
So what do I do?
Include him and make him feel important also, that he's party free.
Beautiful. So same idea. I would include him to make him feel positive. Although over here, Joy, there are more who disagree at this point, because it's one thing not to say a beracha before or after you eat something. Saying a beracha, a blessing before or after you eat something, is really d'Rabbanan. It's rabbinic. But violating Shabbat in public is biblical. That's the roughest kind of thing, right? So in this case, our rabbis say, if you can skirt the issue and make believe you forgot about saying zimun, then skirt it, then avoid it. Because over here, you're dealing with a biblical violation in public. It doesn't get much worse than that. Biblical violation in public. And therefore, the rabbis say, just tell him you forgot to do zimun this time. Just go ahead and start the Birkat Hamazon. Although, there are other people who say, and we can certainly go by this, that in these days, we just simply don't judge people harshly anymore. And I very strongly believe in the sensibility of that, not because it's nicer, but because it's truer. We don't say these days, at least in most circles, we don't say that there's someone called a rasha, an evil person in Judaism. We don't say those people exist anymore. We say if someone is making a mistake in what he or she is doing in terms of Jewish law, we consider them tinokot shenishbe'u. We consider them like babies who were kidnapped when they were babies and never learned the law. So if it's a tinok shenishba, if it's someone who was taken away from his home and didn't have an opportunity to learn this, we judge the person much more gently. So in this case, the people who say, look, it's a public desecration of Shabbat and you can't get around that. Yeah, there are people who say that. For those people, they would say, skirt the issue. Don't embarrass your father. Make believe you forgot to say the zimun today for some reason and just move on. But there are other people who will say, even though it's a violation of Shabbat in public, these days, we don't look at anybody as intentionally having done that. We look at everyone today as someone who made a mistake.
But in general, Ricky, do we have the right to judge anybody?
We don't have the right to judge anybody, but we also need to respect certain criteria in halakha. We can't, look, I'll tell you, you're making a very, very important point. Let's take our community, for example, right? We have an incredibly beautiful practice in our community that overwhelmingly has been positive, which is someone can be, God forbid, a really not good person, and we never exclude that person from the kahal, never, right? We know not everyone in the community is wonderful. Some people are not wonderful at all. But we have, and this was brought down by Rabbi Kassin, because this is not halakha. We as a community will never, never embarrass somebody from the pulpit, never. We will never call out an institution from the pulpit. One rabbi did that once. He called out an institution from the pulpit. And I went over to him and I said, Rabbi, excuse me, but this is not done in our community. Speak to your father and speak to your grandfather and so on. And you'll see whether you were right or wrong in your criticism. We never do this in public. So, and he came back afterwards and he said, I did speak to them, and it is a core value that we don't do these things. So we've adopted a certain approach to people who make mistakes. We've adopted a certain public approach, which is, I think, one of the things that saved this community, right? Even though sometimes,
I agree, because how many people do you know when they were younger, they had to work. That was what they had to do to make a living. And now you look at them and now they're Shomer Shabbat, like time passed and they realize, you know what, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm at a different stage of my life. And then there's other families where the parents weren't religious and the kids were, and then they see like, you know what, maybe there's something to it. And they also, so you can't give up on these people. I think they should be included. And that was Rabbi Kassan's thing. You include everybody.
Exactly.
The work goes first. It's
Beautiful.
That's the way.
That's absolutely right. But now the question becomes, on a strict halachic basis, now to call a person out and embarrass a person, what they used to do in the old days, they'd send someone's koracha home. If someone did something in public that wasn't appropriate, and by the way, they did that in our community too, in the old days. If someone did something that wasn't appropriate, they would send his talit bag home from the shul, meaning you are not welcome in the shul anymore, right? Yeah, okay. That was the power that the community had, right? Okay. But now the question, so as a community, we agree that we love the idea that we're tolerant and accepting, even though sometimes it hurts, the community, because people may be doing things they shouldn't be doing and looked upon as role models and nobody calls them out. But okay, overall, to Joy's point, people make mistakes when they're still included in the Hamon Am, in the Klal, in the everybody. Chances are better that they're going to come around. And at least in our experiences, the overwhelming majority of people have. And their children are even better, and so on. On the other hand, not in the general scheme of things, but on an individual scheme of things, right? When somebody does something like a public violation of Shabbat, and by doing so, he's excluded himself by participating in other mitzvot. Can you participate with him in the other mitzvot? It becomes a question. So if we hold that today, nobody is looked upon as deliberately having done anything like that, they're simply looked upon as people who didn't know enough to do the right thing, which is what Chamav Yosef says here, then it's fine. We don't say that the person publicly violated Shabbat and therefore shouldn't be included in the Birkat Hamazon because he knew what he was doing. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know enough, right? Similar to what we say as a community in the general terms. On the other hand, though, we can't completely look the other way either. We have to know when somebody does something wrong, it's wrong. You with me? So yeah. I have to acknowledge a right and a wrong, but I may be nuanced in my response to that. In general terms, we said we are nuanced. We ignore it in many cases, right? We do. But in individual terms, I may not be able to. But when it comes to dad or mom, the answer is that I sort of dodged the bullet. I look the other way. I judge in the positive, and I try to find a way to create a positive experience out of a negative one in order for dad to see my good qualities and to ultimately emulate them. And we say in our generation in particular, we say that it's olam hafuch, that the world is somewhat upside down, where we say in typical throughout Jewish history, it was the father who taught his son. And there was always a concern of whether the next generation would be as good as the preceding generation. But in the time of Mashiach, the time that we're entering now, God willing, where a lot of people feel we're already in the throes of it with the state of Israel and all the remarkable things going on in the world, positive and otherwise, we say that it's the opposite, that the sons will be building their fathers. And in fact, we've seen that in our own community, and we've seen it in a lot of Jewish communities in the last 50 years, where the children are more religious than their parents, and the children are building their parents and bringing their parents along. Okay. Let's do another case, and then we're going to blow things up into more general, very practical day-to-day things. Okay, we have the question of yain mevushal. My brother Jeff is someone who loves wines, and we were talking about this a few months ago by his house when we were praying there. So now you're getting more and more of these fine wines from Israel that are not boiled. Why don't they boil them? Because by boiling them, you significantly lower the quality. So it's fabulous that Israel now has these award-winning wines, and that these wineries have grown to a level where they have the financial wherewithal to export these wines to America and other places, and we get the benefit of enjoying them. The complexity is that as opposed to Israel, where it's usually Jews with Jews, we have housekeepers who are not Jewish and stuff like that, who may touch the bottle of wine once it's opened and render it unable for us to drink, right? So if something is a wine that's not mevushal, that's not boiled, once it's open, a goy can't touch it. Okay, we have another law that a mechalel Shabbat also can't touch it. Somebody who is desecrates Shabbat also can't touch it. So what you're seeing now at some of the affairs, we're seeing it a little bit here and there. You're going to see it more and more, I believe. When they bring in the better wines, they're only having Jewish people serve them. They're only having Jewish people serve them. It's a mind blower to see that, and in Israel you'll see that as well. You'll see that the wine station will be in a very specific spot, and you won't have any of the Arab waiters serving that wine. You'll only have Jewish people serving the wine. Okay. Now the question becomes, if dad is a violator of Shabbat, right? He doesn't keep Shabbat. He can't touch an unboiled wine, right? A violator of Shabbat also can't touch an unboiled wine. You buy his house. He's making kiddush with the unboiled wine, which you can't touch. Now what? Now what do you do? Now what do you do? So he doesn't keep Shabbat. He's drinking the wine. You can't drink the wine. What do you do about the kiddush? Did you fulfill your obligation on the kiddush? What do you say?
It's
Elaine, what
probably
do you
still the
say?
same.
Zeke?
It's probably still the same deal where your hope or prayer that it's going to change or go forward or be better is probably the same.
Beautiful. So
As
what do you
before.
do, Zeke? Beautiful.
So you drink the wine. You drink the wine and you have in mind that that's what you're hoping for.
Very good. So what we do is we're because it's the father, we depend on those who rule that a Jewish person, if he was mechalel Shabbat, but because he's Jewish, it's still not a problem that he touched the wine. So we go by that ruling, not by the general ruling, even though the general ruling doesn't necessarily say that. And then we tell dad, you know, daddy, when you're saying the kiddush, have me in mind, and I will have in mind that you're saying it for me. Now, Zeke, as we learned in our halakha class, right?
Yep.
What if the person saying the kiddush, this is just a sidebar, what if the person saying the kiddush doesn't understand what he's saying, what's my obligation?
To say it to yourself while that's going on, so that you make
Beautiful.
sure it's being done properly.
Fantastic. You say it to yourself while he's saying it. So when you put these three cases together, the case of not putting a stumbling block before a blind man, the case of saying a zimun, saying that introduction together before the beracha, the grace after meals, the birkat hamazon, and the case of drinking unboiled wine, what the rabbis are looking to do is to say, you can't forget the halacha, mister, talking to the children, right? You can't forget the halacha, but because it's apparent, we're going to try to find a way around a direct confrontation. We're going to find an end around here if we can. But the key is this, and this is very important. The key is, I know the halacha, I understand the competing values. For example, not putting a stumbling block and facilitating my father not saying the bracha. I understand the competing values. I need to understand them. They should be in my mind. And then I say, I understand it, but I'm going to do an end around here because it's dad, because it's mom, because I hope by doing so over time, things will change. Yeah, Serene? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Me? What?
Sorry,
so-
sorry. The Mechalel Shabbat examples are not really stumbling blocks, though, right? Those are not examples of stumbling blocks, are they?
No, two different cases. Yes. Two
Okay,
different
yeah,
cases.
okay, got it.
Yeah, stumbling block was a stumbling block, and the violating Shabbat in public is violating Shabbat in public. Two different cases. Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Also,
we're gonna- Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I have one quick question. So, but why is Mechalel Shabbat connected to like things with food, like zimun, and with the like touching wine? Why is that like
Because
relative?
the person becomes, if a person goes ahead and is violating Shabbat in public, it's one thing to violate Shabbat in your confines of your home. But when someone knowingly goes and violates Shabbat in public, then that person has really made a very dramatic statement about himself and his approach to Torah. And we can't ignore it. You know, it seems so, it's like Pesha. You know, we have Chet, where somebody does something because they don't really understand the mistake they're making. Then you have Avon, where somebody does something knowingly. He knows he's doing something against Jewish law, but does it intentionally. And then you have Pesha, where the person says, I know what I'm doing, and the heck with everybody. And I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it publicly, and I just don't care. And that level person we can't just in a blanket sense embrace that person, because that person is looked upon as on a different level. Now, again, even that person today, by some authorities, is looked upon as someone who just doesn't know better. And that's been our community value, that this person is someone who doesn't know better. But we have to appreciate, one second. We have to appreciate that there are different levels of bad behavior, so to speak. And when someone goes out and does something so overt, so in your face, public, we don't, from a pure Jewish law point of view, look at it the same as someone who may not have known the law and made a mistake, or someone who even knew the law and made a mistake. This is someone who, is, a rebel without a cause kind of thing.
It's still, all in all, I don't get how we have the right to judge this person.
You're not judging.
And say he is religious, he's not religious.
No, you're not judging. Beautiful, Sarah. You're not judging. You're not judging. Yeah, you play bridge on a very high level, right? You're a master player, from what I understand from your friends. You won't say that, but that's what your friends say. You're a master player, right? Correct?
Okay.
She's a master at everything.
I'm saying Among other things, she's a master player. Right, right. I
I
was
wish-
waiting for you, Erwin. I was waiting for you. You
I
got so
wish-
excited.
I needed the
Um,
cue. I needed Sarah. I needed Sarah.
Good. So, Sarah, there are people who are not master players, right? They're not master players. Now, if you're playing in a master player level tournament, you're not judging someone by saying he or she doesn't qualify, but they don't qualify if they're not a master player. You're not being judgmental. You're being very practical, right? They don't qualify, right or wrong. Can I play in your masters tournament?
Yes, you can.
I can't. I don't even know
not
how to
you.
hold.
I'm
Huh?
saying, but what happens is everybody ends up playing together. You know,
I'm
that
not
they're-
talking about that. I got it. I'm talking about a masters level tournament. Could I play in it? The answer is obviously no, right? I don't know how to hold a deck. I obviously can't play in it.
not knowing at all.
No, I don't know. Even if I knew a little, I can't play in it, right?
Okay,
So by
right.
you telling me I can't play in that tournament, you're not judging me. You're just speaking to reality. And that's what we're talking about here. If the person has defined his life in such and such a way, then that's who he is. And he made those choices.
But do people really know that?
Okay, beautiful. So that's why I said beautiful. So there are opinions who say today, nobody really knows that. And nobody is really making an overt choice. They're making an ignorant choice. They're making a choice out of a lack of knowledge or understanding or education or nurturing. And therefore, exactly as you said, we don't judge anybody like that. But my point is, I don't want you to look at this as some moralistic judging or non-judging conversation. I want you to look at it in practical, technical terms. I can't play in your Masters Bridge tournament, even if you stand me on my head and everybody loves each other and everything like that. I can't play in it, right? Because I'm not qualified. Okay.
But that will come out soon as you sit at the table. The
Good.
other way, you have to know a person an entire lifetime to understand what his journey was.
Fine, beautiful. So you're of the rabbis, so to speak, who say that we can't call anyone unqualified today from a religious point of view. And
And we don't.
there's good, beautiful, Zeke, beautiful.
We don't.
And there is a basis for that. There's a basis for that.
So
But
there's
I
no
don't want
application
you
for
to-
this, but there's no
What?
application for Pesach. There's no application in this, in tonight's class, there's no application for Pesach right now, really.
Good, but I'm with you. I'm with you. But I want you to step away from the moralistic perspective, which
Uh-huh.
I agree with. I want you to step away from it, and I want you to embrace the technical laws that we talked about.
Right, but
Right.
it's like with Sarah, I agree with, it's nice in a vacuum that you're acknowledging it by flaunting your disobeying of Shabbat. So, that's what you're doing and we're acknowledging it as well. In a vacuum that works, it's nice. But in real life, when you go and peg somebody as certain something, or even if they are, they don't want to hear it. They don't like it. It doesn't go over well, right?
Okay, fine,
It's-
fine.
Yeah. it's
Zeke,
hard.
let me ask you, Erwin?
No, my thought, excuse me, but my thought was like this, to just kind of clarify. In the judgment of the person, does the benefit of the doubt play a role, or it's a black and white, the guy drove on Shabbat, there's nothing to
that's
talk
what I'm saying.
about?
Right.
Excellent. So that's what I want you to do. I
Exactly.
want you to separate. I don't want you to use the term judgment. Let me ask it to you differently. Somebody takes a test with 10 questions, right? There are 10 questions, there are 10 answers. The person gets 9 questions right. Yeah, he gets 9 questions right. Can we say he got 10 questions right?
No.
No, he got 9 questions right. Am I judging him by saying he got 9 questions right? No,
Yeah.
but he
No,
only
it's a
got 9
statement.
questions right.
Right, so you're making a statement?
No, I'm not making a statement. I'm just going
a
by
fact.
the technical
Fact. It's a
structure.
fact.
It's a fact.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
fact.
But that's
That's what I want you to do. I want you to first be comfortable with the facts.
Right.
The facts are the facts. Don't go moralistic yet. Learn how to deal with that. You know when we bumped into this, some of you guys might remember when we were talking about the whole issue of agunot and people not giving gets in the community
yeah.
and so on. We had 3 or 4 sessions on that, and it's important. Let me understand the black and white Jewish law
Right.
on the issue.
Good. I
Let me
love that.
understand it.
I
Okay?
love that. I love
Okay,
that.
black and white, the person does or doesn't get into the Masters Bridge tournament. Black and white, the person got 9 out of 10 questions right. He didn't get 10. You may want to throw him the 10th because you're a nice guy, but he didn't get 10.
Right,
So-
so it's black, so Ricky, it's black and white. The benefit of the doubt doesn't play a role in this deal,
Right.
Beautiful,
That's all.
Erwin. Beautiful. Perfect.
right?
That's
Okay,
where I
that's
want
what
you to be.
that's what I
But-
wanted to cop.
but
That's
it
what I wanted to
does.
get.
Perfect.
But
Perfect.
it does,
Huh?
because we're not allowing for this practical dynamic to even enter into the halakha. We're not
No,
using it.
Pause. Beautiful, Zeke. Pause. Go where Erwin is right now.
I got it. I know what
Okay,
the rule
good.
is. The guy's in the car on Shabbat. He's Mechalel Shabbat. There's no question about it. We see it, right? There's no,
Right.
We're not blind. We're seeing what we're seeing.
Excellent.
Now, how do you act upon it? And we're saying that today we don't act harshly because we assume people don't know any better.
No, because he's my father.
Oh, and he's your
Right.
father, right?
And because he's
Right.
my father, I'm going to move off the black and white page
Right.
and I'm going to go to a more subjective page. And the halakha gives me the liberty to do that. Now,
Right.
does it always give me the liberty to do that? Absolutely not, even with parents. But I brought you the cases I brought you to make these 2 levels crystal clear.
Mhm.
Be very comfortable with the black and white. It's not judging. It's black and white. He got
Right.
9 questions right and 1 question wrong.
Love
Period.
it. I love it.
You want to go ahead and call him over after the class and say, Jackie, I'm going to give you some extra credit questions because you're a great kid. Do what you want. But that
Right.
has nothing to do with the halakha. That has to do with you having an ulterior motive or an ulterior concern or a moralistic imperative that you want to put in. God bless you. Go do it.
But it's a
But that ain't
compromise.
what we're
That's what it
talking
is.
about.
It's a
Okay?
compromise. Okay.
Good. It's not what we're talking about on the halakha level, but then to all of your points, it does phase in because this is my parent.
Right.
So because it's my parent, now I got to think, I got to nuance the Jewish law. I got to work it and I got to make it a little bit different, maybe, because I have a Torah commandment written 3 or 4 different ways in the Torah, right? About honoring and respecting and fearing a parent. And I can't get away from that. So how do I want to do the 2? I want to acknowledge the halakha. The halakha is the parent is absolutely in the wrong. B, I want to acknowledge that I have a responsibility to honor and fear my father or mother regardless. But you can't reconcile the 2. How do you reconcile the 2? You try to do an end around.
You go around it. You go around it.
Hello? I'm sorry? Good? Okay so far? Now, you guys with me?
Sarah made a statement, Ricky.
Oh,
Sarah
I'm sorry. I
Did you
didn't
hear
hear
it?
it. What'd you
Oh,
say?
I said you go around it.
You go around it. You go around it, but
Parents.
you got to be able to you go around it knowingly. You go around it with the halakha in your hand. That takes it to the most serious level where it's not a moralistic, sweet, nice, even though you may end up in the same place. It doesn't matter. Know the halakha and then go there. Okay. I want to read you something, which is rare that I actually read you something, but I'm going to read and translate something. It's on page 5 of the 2nd book. We worked the first 2 classes on the 1st book of the Kibud Avayim of honoring a parent. This is in the 2nd book. We're going to read from a few different pages, because I want you to hear this now that you saw what you saw. So, מצוות כיבוד אביהם היא גם כשההורים הם קפדניים ומטריחים וצערים את ילדיהם. The mitzvah of kibud abayim, the commandment is even when the parent is causing pain to the child. What? Hold on. Even when the person is causing pain to the child, with all types of complaints and claims, and especially as they get older and they're elderly and more prone to be arbitrary in their behavior. You can even have a case, where a parent curses a child, or they're very tough with their actions and their opinions and very strange with what they do. And they don't behave with respect to the child. And they even go out and speak to other people negatively about their own child. Okay? Pretty crazy, right? Even in this case, the child has to be fearful and respectful of the parent. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? The parent went out, said bad things, hurt me, did things against me, told people things that were not true against me. But even though I have to fear and honor my parents, what are you talking about? Now we get to what the halakha speaks about in this case. Okay, so now you have a case where a parent is really, really off, bad mouthing the child, attacking the child, hurting the child financially, all kinds of things like that, and going out and even to a certain extent on a public level, right? Okay. So what is he saying? You still have to respect them, and you can't be mevazel tam, or you can't disrespect them. But when we call makom, im haitnagut haorim he built in this belet. If this level of behavior from the parents is intolerable, that the parents have bad character traits, and even other people weigh in on it and say they have bad character traits, and maybe the father is an enraged person and an angry person. Listen to this. This is very serious. Yecholim haben o habat lahanicham v'lo lavo elehem v'av shemishum kach yibeser mehem chodam. He says the child can separate himself from them and doesn't have to go to them and doesn't have to visit them, even though by doing so, he is lessening the opportunities to give them respect. You heard the case? You heard the case?
Yeah.
Pretty extreme case. So what would you think the halakha would tell you? You would think, based on what we saw, that the halakha would tell you, suck it up. Too bad. It's your father. The halakha doesn't tell you that. The halakha tells you, you can't fight fire with fire. You can't do that because it's your father, or your mother, or whomever. But you can check out. You can separate. You don't have to walk back into the fire. You don't have to. Now, I think that is a fantastic expression of halakha, where the halakha is speaking to the absolute reality of a situation and saying that, one second, guys, you can't ruin your life for another person, not even a parent. By the way, this is a core Torah value. What was that Robin Williams movie where with the chesed gone too far? Zeke, which one?
Not that poet society.
Not Dead Poets. Yeah, when he's
Oh.
in the hospitals and so on. That's
Awakening.
Huh? I don't remember.
Awakenings.
No, I don't know. I don't remember the name, but there are limits, intelligent limits and reasonable limits. So you would have expected, based on what we learned the last 4 times together on respecting and fearing a father and a mother, that the Torah would say, too bad. If the father is abusive, too bad. But it doesn't say that at all. It says, wait a second, separate from him. Now, do you go back and act the way he's acting? You can't act the way he's acting because of respect. Do you lay down and die? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And do you have to ruin your life? Absolutely not. Separate. And maybe the day will come when his behavior will change, maybe not. And even though the separation means de facto a lessening in the respect that he's getting from you, that's okay.
But there can always be that child in a family that feels his father is picking on him and yelling at him and talking about him, and that leaves a wide open space for a child to say, I'm going to walk away.
Okay,
I
look.
would think it would have been the opposite.
Beautiful, Sarah. So that's why that's why I wanted you to learn this thing in the context of what we talked about before and what we talked about the last few weeks, because the halacha is not moralistic. Halacha is much more rigorous than that. It's much more objective than that. You know, if you're in a moralistic world, then, you know, you always let the father say the Kiddush, even though he's publicly violating Shabbat, you always let him say the Kiddush, right? And you go back and you take what of the junk he throws at you. But that's the halacha is not moralistic. Halacha is much more objective and practical. And we need to learn more halacha. And this is something that you've heard from me many times, because we grew up in a very moralistic society, the most moral society in the history of the world, the United States of America. And we're very, very blessed. But the Torah doesn't work that way. The Torah is much more objective. And therefore, learn the halachot and then moralize about it if you want to. Okay? But over here, the halacha is very strict. It's very smart. You never, ever ruin your life for another person, ever, even your parent. Because we have the core principle that no one's blood is redder than mine. No one. Now, can I openly fight him and disrespect him? No. Can I stand up for my own rights and those of my children? Of course, I must. It's an imperative. It's a commandment. He puts it on the first page of the second book, the book that deals with fathers who are not in the place where they need to be. So this is very important, but I need you to think about it on 2 levels. I want you to think about it in the grand scheme of things, which is halacha, Jewish law, is objective. It's not moralistic. It's not emotional. Sometimes that feels good. Sometimes it feels less good, but it doesn't matter because that's the way it is. B, or maybe I'll call this A and the other one B, nobody comes before me and my children. Nobody. Nobody comes before me and my children. Nobody becomes before me and my wife. Now, does that give me license not to give the utmost respect to my father in general? No. We learned it in the last 4 classes. I got to give the utmost respect. And my wife has to agree and my husband has to agree that we do everything for the parents. Granted. But it also says that I can't be hurt and my family can't be hurt by behavior that's inappropriate. So what do? Do you go out and act like the parent? No. Do you distance yourself? Yes. That's what you do. What do you got to say about that, y'all?
Mhm.
Huh?
But
Nothing like a light Tuesday night get together. No?
But
I-
Ricky, I'm glad, Serene, I'm sorry.
No. You first, go.
No, you, I want to hear what you had to say.
I was just thinking that it goes back to what you were saying about when you respect the parent, like you grow from it and you become a better person. So the fact that the parent is abusing you, it's like counterproductive. If you're going to honor the parent, obviously you're not going to get much out of it if the parent is abusing you. So I feel like maybe that's where they're coming in with that. And all the other examples were really like the beginning ones were about, I think, Ben Adam LaHashem. And this one, I guess, when it comes to between people and people, I think the halacha is less strict because they want you, I mean, more strict. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying different because it's between a person and a person.
Beautiful, but I want to take what you're saying one step further. You're absolutely right. I want to take it one step further. I want you to begin to be comfortable with the fact that in Judaism, I come first. I come first. You don't come first. Now, that shouldn't confuse us. I have to give the absolute respect and regard to a parent, 1,000,000%. But I still come first. And you know what? Selfish in Judaism is a good word.
Wow.
Because in other religions and in other cultures, when people attempt to put other people before themselves, they end up hating themselves and the other person. I come first. So do I have to, if my father goes ahead and throws all my money over the bridge into the ocean and it's gone, can I say anything? No. But do I have to go back and give him another sack of money? No. So where is this all going? I want you to start to be comfortable with a more objective perspective about things. Objectively, the halacha is clear. I have to do everything for my parents. We talked about the distance from which you have to stand up, how long you have to be standing, how you have to stand, how many times you have to stand, right? The Sfaradi poskim, the Sephardic authorities say you have to stand up to 100 times a day, unless you and your father discussed it and put a limit on it, right? We talked about all that stuff. All true. But there's a line which says ad kan. There's a line which says until here. And from this point on, if I'm being compromised, if my me is being taken from me, then that doesn't work. As long as I keep my integrity, it's fine. I'll give you another quick halacha. The halacha is that when you're walking with your parents, you should be walking like someone who is like hesitant and fearful. Like if someone was walking with the president of the United States or the king of a country, right? He would be walking with a different pace, with a different level about him, with a different maybe posture, because he's showing a certain level of humility and fear. That's true. One thing, the halacha goes so far as to describe how I should walk with my parent, that I should look like a person with a little bit of fear because I'm standing with my parent or walking with my parent. Absolutely. All that is true. But then there's a line where we say, stop. If my parent is telling me not to be Shomer Shabbat, not to keep Shabbat, I don't listen.
Wow.
On the other hand, if I'm taking on stringencies, Hamid brings later on in the book, if I'm taking on stringencies that frighten my parents beyond halacha, then I have every right to take them on, but I should do those out of the purview of my parents. So my parent can't tell me to break the halacha, but if I'm doing something beyond halacha and I'm sticking it in his face and I know it frightens or concerns him, do it when he's not around. So I want you to get comfortable with this. I want you to get comfortable with an objective approach. I want you to get comfortable with an all-giving approach to the point where I give myself away. And that is completely against Jewish law. I am not allowed to fold. I am not allowed to give up my identity. I'm not allowed. And
I
Ricky,
yeah.
Yeah.
where does it come that you respect and what your parent, I'll give you, say myself, all my life, when I was a kid, until my dad passed, I built up a love and respect for him just for the mere fact of what he demonstrated to me all my life. So now, if I had to deal with an issue, where does it come where where the respect supersedes the command that's not right?
Good, beautiful. So let's get a specific example. Great, Owen. Let's say a father and son are working together. Did you work with your dad at one time in the
No.
same business? Okay.
No,
Good, better.
because you
Better.
know the dynamics of all of us, but there's no
Yeah.
shot.
That would have been a wild office. I could
No,
say
and my father created the monsters, so there's no
Right,
shot.
right. That would have been something to see. If you're working with your father, for example,
Right,
we mentioned this briefly in one class. You're
right,
not allowed to disagree with him.
Right.
You're not allowed to agree with him. You're not allowed to
Right.
say, Dad, you're right. You can't say, Dad, you're wrong. You also can't say, Dad, you're right, because you don't have the right to say that to your father. So with that in mind, it's almost impossible for parents and children to work together. It's almost
Right.
impossible.
But
It's just-
don't
Yeah, because
parents,
you don't have the ability to be confrontational because the
Yeah, that's
respect
right.
supersedes it.
That's
but
right.
don't the parents want their children to supersede them?
Okay, but that's what I'm telling you, you're right.
Right, but they want it, they want in their own lane. They don't want them in their lane.
I mean, not that they don't want it. This is Hashem. We're talking about Hashem's, the law, not what a parent might want or not want, right? It's about what's right and not, this is a different thing.
Yeah, but
We
how
all
could,
want to get along. We all want that, but
right, but like Ricky said throughout this last hour or so, that if a parent does something that, from what I'm getting is, if a parent does something that's totally off base, how do you stand as the kid?
you can't. So what
So
Sarah
what
said
you want to
before
do is
was,
you want to step back and dodge the bullet when you can. You want to step
Go
away.
around, you have to go.
And you want to step away around it, right? That's what you
Okay.
want.
So, I mean, not to sound corny or anything, but so when Abraham comes up and tells Yitzchak, come, I'm going to take you and sacrifice you. At what point would Yitzchak have the right to say, no, you're crossing the line?
It's a
Should've.
fantastic question, and maybe Serena will write a piece on this one.
Serena.
a tough-
You knew we were
that's a-
going to end up back
Yes,
there, no?
Serena.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Good one,
question is,
though.
the question is,
Good one.
Yitzchak was a grown man, right? He was 30-something years old, right? He was a grown man. The question is, why didn't he say no?
But didn't he say, but Daddy, where's the aisle? Something, didn't he ask him, where's the animal?
He asked him
Yeah.
and he didn't get great
Why-
answers, right? It became fairly clear that, he was the one going up on that altar.
Yes.
And the question becomes, the question is, he was a grown adult. And what was going on here? What was really going on here? If he was a kid, I mean, it would be worse, right? It would be worse if it was a kid. But the fact that he was an adult begs the question of, where was he on this thing?
But
How's-
wasn't it more about trust, not really fear or respect?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it's a great question. I think it's something that should be explored within the context of Kibud Av V'em, of honoring parents.
there's no other indicators in his life for him to think that his father would want to bring him harm, ever.
No, that's
So,
true.
in fact, the opposite.
Oh, that
So-
could be
Oh, very
true.
nice, Nick. That's a very nice point. That's a very nice
good
point.
one. That's a
There
good
wasn't a history here. There wasn't a rap sheet here. There wasn't.
Right. So it was a trust. It was a trust issue, like meaning he
Right.
trusted his dad.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, that's
Okay, you can say
that's
that.
true. That's
But
good. I
also-
like that.
Sarah, you were saying before, it could cause anarchy by giving kids permission to say, Kish, I'm out of here. I don't want to,
Exactly, and I see it in the community. That's
but
what
it
I'm
would-
saying.
but it wouldn't happen because what Ricky said was, there are others, everybody's aware of this. Then the brothers and the sisters, the rest of the family members are probably also on the picket line with the other guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's not, he's not solo in his,
Right,
if he is, then he's
I
probably doing
like
the
that, Z.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that, Z.
Right.
studying a new language.
But the truth of the matter is,
I got it.
Ricky, the age is not relevant to the respect. If a kid's 2 or 80 and the parent's the parent, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And the rabbis make a very strong point in
Where is
saying
he?
that the respect is going to be
Right.
tested as the parents become elderly. And that's
Right.
when the real measuring bar comes in.
Yeah, you said they become cuckoo.
Yeah, when the parent is elderly, and we, as we mentioned earlier on, we start to make certain assumptions, make certain claims, assume certain perspectives. That's when these halachot should be studied very, very rigorously. When we tell parents to move out of their home, when we start to
Wow.
respect a person's medical regimen, these are the most challenging issues. And maybe we'll actually talk about that. The etzik nato, it's called. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. When the parent is in an elderly stage, the criteria that is the sensitivity to all this is heightened, because the parent is in a very limited capacity, or somewhat of a limited capacity, intellectually, emotionally, physically. And the child is usually at the height of his strengths in those areas. And that's where the halacha tends to be very, very strong in talking about how a person has to carry himself. So that might be a nice way to maybe that'll be our next segment, and maybe we'll do 1 or 2 more in total. Good. So to recap, halacha is halacha. Don't go moralistic. Just embrace the halacha in its pure intellectual sense. Get comfortable with it, master it, own it. Once you do that, go through the halacha conversation, then be able to step back and say, but he's dad, but she's mom. But you first got to know the black and white, and then you can do the but. All right. So that's just a mindset and a way of thinking. The other core element, brought by the examples tonight is nobody comes before me. Nobody, not my child and not my parent. And the American perspective of we do everything for our children, our children come first, it's not true, and it's wrong, and it should never be done. Because when I put my children first, not that anybody really honestly does that, but people just say that. But when I put my children first and when I put myself second, it just means that I'm not speaking to my own needs. I'm not caring for my own sense of self-love and importance.
No, but Ricky, I disagree with you. I feel like our parents' generation did put their kids first. They were going to build the world for their kids. We became the generation that started to
So it goes like this. The perspective is this, just to be clear on this. The perspective is this. The way for me to give maximum love to another is to have maximum love for myself. The way for me to give maximum caring and compassion to another is because I give maximum caring and compassion to me. If I'm stealing from myself, self-love and self-appreciation and self-validation, then then I don't have enough to give to others. So I have to fill my emotional bank account.
that's a Jewish concept.
That's 1 billion% Jewish. And the Western perspective, which is what we ascribe to because we've been acculturated to that, is completely antithetical to Judaism. I need to fill my emotional bank accounts. over and over and over. And only when doing so, and only by doing so, can I give tons of love. If I'm empty, if I'm not feeling self-confident and self-loving and self-respectful, and what do I have to give? So I have to, my primary concern is me. That doesn't mean I put anybody second. The opposite. In fact, it means that I have much more to give because I have much more in me. I'm not depleted. I'm full of love. I'm full of laughter. I'm full of good stuff because I feel great about me.
Ricky, it's very hard for, I think I'm a parent, there's older parents here in the class, hear what you're saying and not translate it to mean financial support with your children, and not translate that to mean I have to take care of me before I take care of my children,
Right.
and with finances. And so how do you separate the two, the emotional, the oxygen from the money?
So the finances is trickier, particularly in our time, it's trickier. And over here, I really believe that in terms of finances and what a parent holds on to and doesn't hold on to, and how a parent indulges and engages a certain lifestyle and what they don't do to give the money to their children. I think in our time, because this is a very, very complicated and I would say close to impossible thing, everybody has to have a mentor and a dear friend on these questions. You can't do this yourself. No, you can't.
Right. It's hard.
Because some people end up giving too much to their children.
Right.
Other people don't give enough to their children. And I think in either case, clearly it's not the best thing.
Ricky,
And therefore you need a sounding board,
Right,
someone
right.
who is trustworthy, intelligent, sophisticated, who can guide and walk through these issues and objectify them.
so Ricky, I've jumping on that. I could definitely tell you from experience on that my mantra has always been with regarding Zeke's statement, that I tell everybody that, and I learned it in my life, and when I didn't practice it, it didn't turn out, especially in a situation like he said, when you can't remove the emotion from the transaction, you're out, you lost. So, and in family issues that I've seen hundreds of cases over the years, a classic case when a community member came to me, 3 generations were in the business. The father was in the 80s, the boys, the 2-3 boys were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and their kids were in their 20s. And the company was losing a lot of money, and a lot of the kids were performing and not performing and didn't go to work and da. And they came to us at the time, to my organization. We've had meetings, and the bottom line was, how do we split up? How do we get the boys out? How do we get this? How do we get that? When I finally sat down with the father, who was in his 80s, he said, leave everything alone. They're all my children. I don't care what happens to my money.
Right. And you know what?
Wow.
He from a
And they
from
were
a
losing
mom-
millions, and they were
Right.
losing millions of dollars. But
from
the
a
emotion, it's my grandchild. Leave him alone.
So from a moralistic perspective, that works. From a Jewish perspective, it doesn't.
Right?
From a Jewish perspective, all these things should be done with a third party, someone like you,
Exactly, right.
and who objectifies the conversation, not for anybody to be hurt, but
Right.
but to deal with the objective reality and make the best of it.
Yeah, because we know that answer doesn't serve those kids, right? Those 20-year-olds that are not doing anything in that business, it's nice that their grandfather loves them that much. It is, but they're not being served here, right? They're going to suffer as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah, long term, they're gonna suffer. When
Right.
the till runs out,
That's right.
they're,
Not even if it doesn't run out, they're just never
Right.
going to have this fulfilling
Right.
feeling of doing anything for
Right.
themselves, and they're
Right.
going to, whatever.
Good
So
point.
go to, in all these cases, let's be objective. Let's look at halacha in a very black and white way. And after we look at halacha, Jewish law, objectively, then let's add on that element of subjectivity and moralism and emotion, but not before.
Right.
So really,
Then-
what you said, like in the beginning of classes, ya'archu et chayecha, and you get the best out of it. You grow from honoring your parents. It's
Right.
really about you.
That's
Right.
right.
True.
And you'll hear that when you listen to Serene's class, because she highlighted.
I can't wait. I can't wait. So put it on YouTube. Put it on.
I will. We'll get it done. Gailey
Okay.
was away, so she's back,
Okay.
so we'll get it done.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
right,
and
great
that was
to
a
see
great, that was a
everybody.
great class. Okay,
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
great class.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ricky.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Class,
everybody.
Okay,
Thank
Bye,
you
good
so
guys.
night.
much.
Have a
Thank
great
you.